Why did the captain throw her a broken rifle, like an insult disguised as a weapon? The steel hit Emma's palms hard enough to sting. Dust clung to the sweat on her arms as she caught it midair, the impact absorbed without thought, without flinch. Around her, the air shuddered under concussive blasts. Mortar rounds landed close, too close, rattling the thin concrete walls of forward operating base Sabre. Somewhere beyond those barriers, 180 insurgents were closing in like a tide of fire. And in the middle of it stood Emma Cross, the woman everyone thought was just another desk sergeant, quiet, dutiful, forgettable. Captain Derek Stone's voice cut through the noise, harsh and mocking. "Take it, secretary. At least pretend you know which end shoots." He was 6'4", built like a linebacker, the kind of officer who never said ma'am unless it was an insult. Emma had heard it all before, soft-spoken, support role, admin girl. To Stone, her job was to type, file, stay invisible. And for 7 months, that's exactly what she'd done. But in the heart of chaos, invisibility can become a kind of armor. Nobody watches the quiet one too closely. She ran her thumb along the rifle's receiver. The safety clicked, a reflexive sound that made Private Martinez glance sideways. He was young, 20 maybe, trembling behind a stack of sandbags, knuckles white around his M4. When Emma moved, his eyes followed like he was seeing something impossible. Because she didn't just hold the rifle. She handled it, with the fluid ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. The sirens had started screaming at 1500 hours, and by now the ground was shaking under the assault. Fob Sabre wasn't a fortress, just a lonely outpost in Iraq's Anbar province, 65 soldiers behind barriers that suddenly looked like cardboard. The first wave was minutes away, maybe seconds. The air already smelled of dust, diesel, and cordite, the scent of a battle about to break. "Cross, get your skinny ass to supply and grab more mags," Stone barked. Emma nodded and sprinted, boots pounding the packed dirt. Behind her, the captain's voice was already shouting new orders, desperate ones. The radio crackled with half-finished reports, positions overrun, towers going down. Somewhere in that chaos, a small part of Emma's mind stayed calm, detached, counting distance, listening, waiting. Then she heard it, a sound hidden beneath the storm. Crack thump. A sniper, the distinct rhythm of a Dragunov SVD. Her head turned instinctively like an animal catching scent. That sound didn't belong to the random noise of battle. It was precision fire, deliberate and measured. 950 meters, she murmured. Northwest ridge, probably behind that rock cluster. Martinez blinked. "What did you say?" "There's a sniper up there. Tell Captain Stone to shift 3rd Squad 25 meters south or they'll be in his kill zone." "How could you possibly?" "Just tell him." The private hesitated, then ran off. Emma adjusted her headset, breathing slow. Seconds later, another shot cracked the air, this one met by a scream from the perimeter. She didn't need to look to know what happened. 3rd Squad, exactly as she'd said. When Martinez returned, Stone's voice was louder, sharper, desperate. "Tower 2's down. They're inside the wire." That phrase, "inside the wire," hit Emma like ice water. The perimeter was breached. The enemy was already among them. By the time she reached the command post again, Sabre was collapsing. Mortar explosions tore through the outer wall, and the defenders were pulling back under a hail of automatic fire. Stone's voice cracked over the comms, ordering a fallback, but his tone carried something else now, fear. He spotted Emma ducking behind a barrier and shouted, "Cross, where the hell are those magazines?" She didn't answer. Her eyes had already found something more important. That same sniper fire, steady, rhythmic. Southwest ridge this time, new angle. Someone was directing it, coordinating from distance. This wasn't random chaos. It was a strategy. Before she could say it aloud, Stone noticed the rifle slung across her shoulder. "What are you doing with that?" he sneered. "You're qualified on PowerPoint, not weapons." Then came another blast, an RPG slamming into the comm's antenna, showering sparks. The brief silence that followed was deafening, and in that silence Emma heard it again, the Dragonov's echo tracing through smoke. She felt it in her bones, that old, buried part of herself waking up. "Southwest," she whispered. 8 degrees right of that burned-out technical, he's there." Stone grabbed her arm roughly. "I don't have time for your guessing games, secretary." He shoved his personal rifle toward her. "Here, let's see what our paper pusher can do. Try not to shoot yourself, princess." He meant it as mockery, but his laughter died halfway out of his throat when Emma dropped the mag, racked the bolt, and frowned. "Jam solid," she said. Stone smirked, "Just like your brain when you—" But she was already moving, kneeling, stripping the weapon down to its components with hands that moved faster than thought. The young private's jaw fell open as he watched her clear the double feed, clean the bolt carrier, reassemble, and run a function check, all in 9 seconds. She didn't explain how she knew. There was no time. Outside, the world burned. They moved together toward cover, Martinez behind her, Stone still trying to process what he'd seen. Emma's movements were efficient, too efficient. She advanced, shifted positions, sighted down lanes of fire, all with the rhythm of a veteran soldier. But that couldn't be true. She was admin. That's what her file said. That's what everyone had believed. Rodriguez's voice crackled through comms. "All stations, this is Sabre 6. Air support is 20 minutes out. Hold your positions." 20 minutes, an eternity in battle time. Emma crouched low, peering through the swirling dust toward the ridge. Through her headset, Rodriguez's voice came again, sharper this time. "Who's calling wind corrections on this frequency?" Her eyes widened. She hadn't realized she'd been doing it aloud, subconsciously feeding wind calls and corrections over the channel. Old habits, old training. The colonel's tone shifted, uncertain. "Say again, who is this?" But she'd already switched frequencies, fading back into silence. The next moment, through a break in the smoke, she saw him, the man orchestrating it all, slightly apart from the others, flanked by guards with RPGs. Command posture, radio pack. Every gesture directed movement, death. "I've got eyes on their commander," she said quietly. Martinez followed her gaze. "What? You can't even see?" Radio antenna on his back. 3 guards. He's calling their mortar teams. Her voice carried a flat certainty that silenced him. 45 seconds from now, he'll shift fire to the ops center. Stone overheard, scoffing. But 45 seconds later, the first mortar landed squarely on the command roof. He looked at her, the sneer gone. "How the hell did you know that?" She didn't answer. Her mind was already elsewhere, calculating. Wind speed, 6 to 8 meters per second right to left. Distance, 950 meters. Elevation, minor. Barrel fouling, heavy. Sights, bent. Stone's shout cut through her concentration. "Cross, what are you?" "Captain," she interrupted, voice sharp as a blade. "Either help or get out of my way." Something in her tone, cold, commanding, made him hesitate. The woman in front of him wasn't the quiet staff sergeant anymore. Her shoulders squared differently. Her stance changed. When the vest shifted, a scar on her shoulder caught the light, a deep circular mark, radiating outward like a starburst. Martinez saw it and whispered, almost to himself, "That's a sniper's callus." Emma took a breath, steady and measured. Wind full value, 6 to 8, gusting. Her eyes didn't blink as she lined up the shot. Around her, men shouted, bullets tore through air, explosions shook the ground. But she was somewhere else entirely, in the calm center of the storm. She squeezed the trigger. Nothing, a dead click. For a heartbeat, her blood froze. The rifle jammed again, but the fear didn't show. Her hands moved automatically, tap, rack, bang, perfect muscle memory. The round chambered. The weapon came alive. Time slowed. Her breathing became metronomic. Inhale, half pause, exhale, squeeze. The world narrowed to the tiny iron notch in front of her and the faint shimmer on the ridge. She didn't see the chaos anymore, only the geometry of the shot. The rifle kicked. The recoil hit her shoulder like an old friend. 950 meters away, through heat and dust and smoke, the enemy commander's head snapped back in a pink mist. His body folded, boneless and final. The line between life and death erased by one impossible shot. For 4 long seconds the world didn't move. Then it unraveled. Enemy chatter erupted, panicked, broken. Fighters stumbled, leaderless. Their coordination dissolved. Within moments, their assault turned to retreat. Martinez was staring at her, speechless. Stone's mouth hung open, the disbelief raw and naked. "Nobody makes that shot," he muttered. "Not with iron sights, not with a jammed rifle." But Emma wasn't listening. She'd already shifted, scanning for new threats, reloading with precise, unhurried motions. Her face betrayed nothing. Inside, though, something deep was stirring, the part of her she'd buried years ago under bureaucracy and silence. Rodriguez's voice crackled again. "Outstanding shooting. Who made that shot?" Stone hesitated, then keyed his radio. "Sir, it was Sergeant Cross, the admin NCO." Static filled the line for a moment, then a low voice, disbelieving. "Say again, did you say Cross?" "Affirmative, sir. Staff Sergeant Emma Cross." There was a pause, then Rodriguez spoke again, quieter this time. "Phantom, after all this time it can't be." Above them the air shifted, the whoop-whoop-whoop of rotor blades cutting through the heat. 2 US-60s appeared, black and unmarked, sliding through the smoke like ghosts. They came in low, door gunners firing into the ridge. Dust swirled, shrapnel glittered. Emma's eyes followed their approach, and for the first time that day, a flicker of recognition passed across her face. She knew those birds, she knew who flew them. Operators in black kit fast-stroked down, moving with precision that didn't belong to regular infantry. Navy SEALs, reinforcements, but not by chance. Not here, not now. As one of them looked her way, a graying master sergeant with mirrored shades, she saw recognition in his stance. Shock, even. He froze mid-stride like he'd seen a ghost. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The insurgents broke and ran, leaving the ground littered with the dead and dying. The silence afterward was heavy, unreal. Dust settled over everything like ash. Then another chopper appeared, a command bird, big, bristling with antennas. It circled once, then touched down. Out stepped Major General Marcus Kaine, commander of Joint Special Operations Command. The kind of man who didn't set foot on a battlefield unless the universe had tilted. He walked straight through the wreckage until he stood in front of her. "Master Sergeant Cross," he said quietly. His eyes didn't blink. "Or should I still call you Phantom?" For a moment, Emma didn't breathe. The name hit like a ghost rising from the grave, one she thought she'd buried forever. She spent 4 years pretending to be no one, but names have a way of finding their owners. Her silence said everything. Kaine nodded almost softly. "Welcome back." Why was a general standing in front of a woman whose name didn't officially exist? The dust still hung thick over the landing zone. The air reeked of burnt cordite and diesel fumes. Soldiers stood frozen, their faces smeared with soot, watching as Major General Marcus Kaine, 2 stars on his chest, reputation like iron, faced down the quiet staff sergeant who just saved them all. "Master Sergeant Cross," he said again, as if testing whether the name still fit. Then quieter, "Or should I say Phantom?" Emma didn't move. Her grip tightened on the rifle still hanging from her shoulder. Around them, silence spread like shockwaves. Even Captain Stone, loud, arrogant Stone, was speechless. The name hung in the air, heavy as a confession. Phantom, the ghost story whispered through the special operations community, the sniper who disappeared after Fallujah, the one who'd held a perimeter alone when the world went dark, officially listed as KIA, unofficially myth. Emma swallowed hard, her voice steady but low. "Sir, I'm just admin now." But Kaine shook his head. "Not anymore." He handed a tablet to one of the operators beside him. A file flashed across the screen, classified, redacted, familiar. Operation Desert Wraith. Her breath caught. That name was supposed to be buried, locked away in sealed archives. Kaine's tone softened, but only slightly. "You were presumed dead after Wraith. You and your spotter held off 150 insurgents for 18 hours while Delta extracted a downed pilot. That report became legend, but the file says you never made it out." Emma's jaw clenched. Her voice came out almost a whisper. "I made it out, Thompson didn't." The wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of blood and dust. Kaine nodded slowly. "You requested discharge, new identity, administrative assignment." His eyes narrowed. "You didn't just disappear, Cross, you buried yourself." "I had my reasons." "I'm sure you did," Kaine replied, "but fate didn't seem to care." He turned the tablet toward her. On it, grainy drone footage from earlier that day. The ridge, the shot, the impossible kill at 950 meters. He tapped the screen. "This," he said, "wasn't random. Signal intel confirms the man you neutralized was trained by the same network that ambushed your unit at Wraith." Emma felt her throat tighten. For a long second she couldn't find words. "You're saying the man I killed today wasn't just a commander, he was bait. Someone wanted to draw you out, confirm you were still alive, and now they know." The noise of the base faded into nothing. Her pulse echoed in her ears. She spent 4 years building a quiet, anonymous existence. Every morning she'd filed reports, brewed coffee, stayed out of sight. She convinced herself Phantom was dead. But with one shot she'd resurrected her own ghost. Kaine looked at her for a long moment, studying the calm that hid the storm beneath. "I need you back on active status," he said finally. "You're the only one who's faced this network and lived." Emma's gaze drifted toward the horizon, the ridge where the fight had ended. Smoke curled upward in thin black ribbons. Somewhere beyond that line of heat shimmer, the enemy regrouped, whispering her name again. "Phantom." Her voice came quiet, controlled. "You said they know now that I'm alive." "They do," Kaine confirmed, "which means this isn't over." A helicopter engine whined nearby, rotors idling. Kaine gestured toward it. "The bird leaves in 20 minutes. Pack what you need." Emma didn't move. For a long time she just stared at the ground, the dirt stained with blood and shell casings. Around her the surviving soldiers stood in a loose ring, watching. They didn't cheer. They didn't speak. Some saluted. Others just nodded, like men acknowledging something they didn't fully understand. Captain Stone finally found his voice. "General, with respect, she's admin. There's no record of." Kaine turned, his expression sharp. "Records lie, skill doesn't." Stone's protest wilted under that tone. Martinez, still clutching his rifle, looked at Emma like she was both a miracle and a mystery. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There were no words big enough for what he'd just seen. Emma walked past them without a sound. The sun was sinking now, turning the base gold and red. Every step she took felt heavier, like walking back into a shadow she'd spent years trying to escape. In the makeshift barracks she packed quietly essentials only. No medals, no letters, just gear. Her movements were deliberate, mechanical. A duffel, her sidearm, a folded photo she hesitated over. 2 figures in desert fatigue smiling. Her and Thompson, before Fallujah, before everything. She stared at the photo for a long time before tucking it inside her vest pocket. Outside, Kaine waited beside the helicopter, speaking into his headset. His voice was all command again, crisp, focused. When he saw her approach, he nodded once. No words, none needed. As she climbed aboard, the wind from the rotors tore through the dust. The soldiers on the pad raised their hands in salute. Martinez was among them, his face streaked with grime and awe. Captain Stone stood stiffly beside him, the shame of his earlier contempt written plain on his features. Emma didn't look back for long, just enough to see the small outpost, Saber, shrinking behind her as the helicopter lifted off. The world below turned into a patchwork of shadow and ruin, framed by the dying light of the desert. She thought of the sound of that broken rifle's click, the weight of it in her hands, the precision, the calm, the inevitability of what she'd done. She had saved them, but in doing so, she had also resurrected everything she'd tried to bury. The bird banked west, flying low over the desert. Inside the cabin, the SEAL operators sat silent, eyes hidden behind dark lenses. Their faces gave nothing away, but their posture said enough. They knew who she was now, or who she had been. Phantom. One of them, the older one with gray streaks in his hair, finally spoke, his voice quiet enough that only she could hear. Didn't think I'd ever see you again. Emma looked up surprised. Barnes. He smiled faintly. Guess you remember. Barnes, SEAL Master Sergeant. They'd crossed paths once. Wraith extraction, chaotic, bloody. He'd been one of the last to see her before she vanished. Now here he was again, like a fragment of another lifetime circling back. You disappeared, he said. Word was you were gone. Some said you couldn't handle it anymore. Emma's eyes stayed on the horizon. Some things aren't meant to be handled. They're just survived. Barnes nodded slowly, the respect in his silence heavier than any apology. You made one hell of a comeback. She gave a dry, humorless smile. Wasn't trying to. Funny, he said. The good ones never are. The engines roared louder as the bird climbed. The sun dipped below the horizon and the desert turned to shadow. Emma leaned back, closed her eyes, and tried to steady her breathing. But rest wouldn't come. Not now, not with the ghosts awake again. Her mind wandered back to Fallujah, to the last time she'd fired a rifle like that. The screaming, the smoke, the way Thompson's voice faded over the radio mid-sentence. She'd carried that silence with her ever since, a silence too deep to fill with paperwork or small talk. Now, Kaine's voice broke through her thoughts over the intercom. Phantom, this is Kaine, debrief in 10. She exhaled. He used the name again. Phantom, not Emma, not Cross. The name felt heavy, old, dangerous, like a uniform she'd left behind but never really stopped wearing. When the helicopter finally touched down, the scene below looked like another world, a blacked-out base, floodlights cutting through desert night, shadows of armed men moving with purpose. The insignia on the hangar wall was unmistakable, JSOC. The moment her boots hit the ground, everything shifted. Silence fell among the operators moving gear. Some glanced her way and stopped mid-motion, as if seeing a ghost materialize. One of them whispered her code name, barely audible. Phantom. Kaine walked beside her, posture stiff, voice low. Half this place still thinks you're a legend, he said. The other half doesn't believe you ever existed. That's how good you were. Was, she corrected softly. Kaine glanced at her. You sure about that? She didn't answer. He led her into a briefing room, sterile walls, faint hum of electronics, a digital map flickering on the far screen. Satellite imagery glowed in shifting red grids. Kaine stood before it, arms crossed. Intel confirms this, he began. Your target today wasn't acting alone. That ridge position, coordinated by a shadow cell out of Aleppo, calls itself the Revenant Network. They're ex-military, trained, funded, disciplined, and they've been one step ahead of every team we've sent. Emma stared at the screen, watching small red dots pulse across the map. They ambushed Wraith, she said flatly. Kaine nodded. Same insignia, same tactics. They wanted you dead then, they failed. Now they want to finish what they started. He turned, his voice dropping to something almost human. This isn't a mission brief. It's personal for both sides. Emma met his gaze, unflinching. And what do you want from me, sir? I want the truth, Kaine said. About Fallujah, about what really happened out there. Her breath hitched. The words she hadn't spoken in 4 years pressed at the back of her throat, burning. But before she could answer, the lights flickered. A soft chime echoed from the console, an incoming encrypted feed. Kaine frowned, tapped a code. The monitor blinked. A symbol appeared, a black raven drawn in ash and flame. Emma's face went still. She recognized it instantly. Thompson had drawn it once in blood on a crumbling wall. Kaine looked at her. "What is that?" Her voice was almost a whisper. "It's their signature." He studied her expression for a long moment. "Then it looks like they've just sent us a message." The screen flashed again. Lines of text appeared, scrolling in broken Arabic. A translation window followed. "Phantom never died. We saw her rise. Now she bleeds next." Kaine's eyes narrowed. "They're coming for you." Emma didn't blink. She just watched the words fade, then whispered the truth she'd known all along. They always were. Outside, the desert wind howled against the hangar walls, as if carrying ghosts back from Fallujah. And for the first time in years, Emma Cross felt the weight of being alive again, heavy, complicated, and impossibly fragile. Why did her hands tremble more now in silence than they ever had under fire? The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the debriefing room, cold and constant. Emma sat alone at the steel table, the same one that had witnessed hundreds of classified interrogations, though none quite like this. Her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored glass across the room, a face hardened by dust, sweat, and something far older than exhaustion. Her rifle lay disassembled in front of her, not as evidence but as comfort. She ran a cloth along the carbon-streaked bolt carrier, movement steady, ritualistic. It was the same rhythm she'd used 1,000 times before, calm in the aftermath of chaos. Only this time, it wasn't working. The door opened softly and Kaine entered. He wasn't in full uniform now, just fatigues and fatigue itself. The lines around his eyes had deepened. He closed the door behind him, set a thick folder on the table, and studied her for a long moment. "Do you know what's in here?" he asked finally. Emma didn't look up. "My obituary." Kaine's lips twitched into something almost like a smile. "Close enough." He slid the folder toward her. Her own face stared back from the first page, younger, sharper. Master Sergeant Emma Cross. Call sign, Phantom. The report stamped across the top read, KIA Operation Desert Wraith. Emma let out a quiet breath. "You kept it neat." "Some ghosts deserve neat records," Kaine said. He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, elbows on the table. "I've been reading through everything we had on Wraith, but a lot of it doesn't make sense. Your after-action reports were incomplete. Satellite logs were erased. The only communication recorded was a single transmission, hold until dark. After that, nothing." Her eyes stayed fixed on the weapon parts in front of her. "That's because there was nothing left to transmit." Kaine leaned forward slightly. "Tell me what happened." For a long time she said nothing. The sound of her cleaning cloth was the only thing between them. Then slowly she began to speak, her voice low, even, and lined with something brittle. "It was supposed to be a recovery op. Delta team was pinned outside Fallujah, one pilot down, minimal resistance expected. Simple." She paused, her fingers tightening around the rifle's receiver. "It wasn't simple." Her words came slower now, like each one had to be pulled through a wall of memory. "They hit us before we even reached the perimeter. Perfect ambush. Coordinated fire from 3 angles. We lost half the team in the first 2 minutes. I dragged Thompson behind a concrete barrier, but the comms were already down. The pilot was gone. So was everyone else." Her eyes unfocused, drifting somewhere far away. "They kept coming. I don't know how many, maybe 100, maybe more. We held for 18 hours. I shot until the barrel glowed red, until I could smell the metal burning. Thompson took one in the chest near dawn. He tried to reload before he fell. I remember catching his rifle before it hit the ground." The silence stretched between them. Kaine didn't interrupt. The hum of the lights seemed louder now, almost accusatory. When the rescue team arrived, Emma continued, I was the only one left. Delta wanted to debrief me, but I didn't have anything to say. Nothing except that I didn't want to be her anymore. Phantom, Kaine asked quietly. She nodded. That name didn't feel like me. It felt like a punishment. Kaine exhaled through his nose, slow and deliberate. You walked away. I requested discharge, she corrected softly. I earned peace, or at least silence. But peace isn't what you got, is it? Emma looked up then, her eyes darker than the room around them. Peace is just the name we give the space between wars. Kaine let that hang. He opened another file, flipping through pages marked with red seals. Signal intercepts from this morning confirmed the Revenant Network's broadcast originated near Mosul. Same pattern, same encryption key used during Wraith. He looked at her. They wanted you to see that message. She leaned back in her chair, the old scar on her shoulder catching the light. They didn't just want me to see it. They wanted to remind me why I left. Kaine's tone softened slightly. You think they're taunting you? They're warning me, she said. And if they know I'm back, they won't stop at warnings. For the first time, Kaine looked uneasy. He reached into his vest pocket and slid a small drive across the table. Then you'd better see this. Emma plugged it into the nearby console. Grainy drone footage flickered on the wall screen, a convoy in motion. Black trucks with no insignia. Inside one of them, through infrared blur, she saw faces. Men in military gear, but not insurgents. Too precise, too clean. Kaine's voice broke through the static hum. These aren't just mercenaries. They're trained former US, UK, Russian spec ops, ghost units, exiled. The Revenant Network recruits from every shadow. Emma watched the footage quietly. One of the faces came into focus. A man with dark hair, the faint outline of a scar running along his temple. Her breath hitched. She froze. Kaine caught it instantly. You know him. Her voice came low. Mikhail Varanov. Kaine flipped open a file. Former GRU marksman, disappeared 5 years ago. He didn't disappear, Emma said. He was at Fallujah on their side. The general's expression hardened. You're telling me the man who led the ambush is still alive, she finished. And if he's running Revenant, then they're not just training snipers, they're building ghosts. Kaine stood, his hands on the table. That's why I need you, Cross. No one else knows their methods. You understand how they think, how they hide. Emma shook her head slowly. You don't want me back, sir. You want the thing I was, and that thing doesn't exist anymore. You're wrong, he said. You proved it at Sabre. One shot, one impossible shot. That wasn't admin, that was Phantom. She stared down at the rifle parts again, her reflection broken across the metal. You think one shot makes me her again. You don't know what being her costs. Kaine's voice softened almost to a whisper. I think you do. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. We brief at 600. Your choice whether you're in the room. The door closed behind him and the silence returned, thick, heavy, unrelenting. Emma sat motionless, staring at the ghost of herself reflected in the steel table. The woman who'd survived Fallujah. The one who'd died there anyway. She reassembled the rifle piece by piece, each click of metal like a heartbeat finding its rhythm again. When the last pin locked in place, she whispered to the empty room. You were right, Thompson. We don't get to choose our wars. They just find us. She stood, slinging the rifle across her shoulder, and stepped into the corridor. The base was quiet now, dim lights, long shadows. Outside, the desert stretched endless and unforgiving. Somewhere beyond that horizon, men were already planning her death. As she walked toward her quarters, she passed a window overlooking the tarmac. The night wind rippled across the sand, and for a second she saw it again, the emblem burned into the dark, the raven in flame. She pressed her hand against the glass, feeling the cool surface under her palm. Somewhere inside her, something shifted, not anger, not fear. Resolve. If they wanted Phantom, they'd get her, but not the one they remembered. This time she wouldn't be their ghost, she'd be their reckoning. Behind her, a voice broke the silence. Couldn't sleep either. Emma turned. Barnes leaned against the wall, coffee in hand, his face half-lit by the corridor light. He looked older, too, like men do when they've buried too many friends. Never could after a firefight, she said. He offered a faint smile. Heard Kaine's bringing you in. Emma shrugged. He asked, did you say yes? I didn't say no. Barnes nodded slowly, sipping his coffee. You know, when people talk about Phantom, they don't talk about the kills. They talk about how you never missed when it mattered. She met his eyes. Everyone misses eventually. He tilted his head. Did you? Her answer came soft but sure. Not that day. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the bass filled the silence again. Then Barnes set his cup down and straightened. If you go back out there, you won't be coming alone. Kaine's building a team. He thinks Revenant, working on something big. Emma raised an eyebrow. What kind of something? Barnes' expression darkened. They've been testing weaponized drone systems, human-guided. Sniper control integrated with AI. We intercepted chatter calling it Project Rebirth. Her stomach turned at the name. Rebirth, she repeated. Fitting, isn't it? Barnes gave a grim nod. They're rewriting what ghosts mean. Emma looked out the window again. Then maybe it's time someone reminded them. She turned to leave, the echo of her boots steady against the metal floor. Behind her, Barnes called out quietly, You sure you're ready for this? She didn't answer right away. The door hissed open. The desert wind met her like an old enemy. Then she looked back just once, her voice almost lost in the gust. No one's ever ready. We just stop pretending we're not afraid. And with that, she walked out into the darkness, where the horizon waited like a loaded chamber, silent, expectant, inevitable. Because some ghosts don't haunt to be remembered. They haunt to be finished. Why did it feel more terrifying to stand among allies than it ever had to face an enemy? The desert air before dawn was colder than memory. A thin line of orange light scraped across the horizon, touching the hangar roofs and the metal edges of the aircraft parked in silence. Emma stood at the edge of the tarmac, her shadow stretching long across the concrete. The smell of aviation fuel drifted through the stillness. She should have felt comfort in the order of it all, the clipped movements, the pre-flight checks, the language of soldiers preparing for war. But it only reminded her of how easily she had once belonged to this world, how easily she had bled for it. Barnes joined her, clipboard in hand. Wheels up in 10, he said. You sure you want to do this? She didn't look at him. If I said no, you'd believe me. Not for a second. He grinned faintly, then gestured toward the aircraft waiting nearby. A matte black Osprey with no insignia, just a tail number erased by dust. Around it, a small unit moved with practiced quiet. 6 operators, all JSOC. Their gear matched, their faces unreadable. One of them, a tall man with a shaven head and mirrored goggles, glanced at her and then looked away, muttering something to the others. She caught only the word Phantom before the noise of the rotors drowned it out. Kaine appeared a few minutes later, clipboard under one arm, his voice cutting through the wind. All right, listen up. We're wheels up to Al-Qadisiyah. Local intel confirms Revenant activity near the River Bend, possible weapons lab. You're going in quiet. Identify, extract data, exfil before dawn. He looked at Emma last. Cross, you'll coordinate Overwatch. We'll set you up on high ground. Standard comm protocol. No unnecessary kills. Her eyes flicked to him, calm and measured. Define unnecessary. Kaine met her gaze. You know what I mean. She didn't answer. He gave the team a final nod and walked away, radio pressed to his ear. The others filed aboard the Osprey. Barnes lingered behind, his eyes tracing her face with a mix of caution and loyalty. They're not used to having legends on the roster, he said quietly. Try not to scare them. She almost smiled. No promises. The engines roared to life. Dust rose around them, a storm of sand and sound. Emma climbed aboard, strapping herself beside the others. The interior smelled of oil, sweat, and anticipation. As the Osprey lifted, the desert fell away beneath them, shrinking into a canvas of rust and shadow. No one spoke for the first 20 minutes. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Across from her, the tall man with the mirrored goggles finally pulled them off. His eyes were sharp, gray like unpolished steel. "Name's Holt," he said flatly, "team lead." "Cross," she replied. He gave a small nod. "I know who you are. My old co used to tell your story before deployments, said you could shoot the wings off a fly at 900 yards. Emma's tone stayed even. "Flies are unpredictable. Not as unpredictable as you coming back from the dead." She said nothing. The others chuckled softly, a nervous sound. It wasn't hostility, it was all wrapped in discomfort. The myth of Phantom was sitting in their jump bay, real and silent and watching. The Osprey banked suddenly, tilting them toward the horizon. Through the small porthole she saw the river glint like glass in the dawn light. Holt tapped his headset. "Approach vector confirmed. Cross, you're on Ridge 2, we move when you give green." She nodded, checking her rifle. The weapon felt right now, balanced, tuned, hers again. Not a relic, not a punishment, an extension. The drop zone came fast. The ramp lowered, wind howling through the cabin. The team moved like ghosts, descending the rappel line into the waiting dark. Emma followed last, landing in soft sand, the smell of dry grass and motor oil thick in the air. They moved through silence broken only by the crunch of boots. The world around them was painted in faint moonlight, broken walls, scorched vehicles, remnants of another forgotten battle. She felt the terrain like muscle memory, scanning every rise and shadow for geometry, angles, threats. At Ridge 2, she settled in behind a cluster of rock and scrub. Her rifle's scope glinted briefly before she adjusted it, aligning it with the low-lit compound below. From here, she could see the movement: 3 guards, 2 patrols, 1 truck idling by the main gate, 2 disciplined for scavengers. Revenant. "Visual confirmed," she whispered into her mic. 3 guards, 1 sentry post northeast corner, compound active. Holt's voice came back low. "Copy that, wait for our mark." Her breathing steadied. The desert's pulse slowed with hers. Wind direction steady, cross from east. Distance 780 meters. She adjusted almost absently, the way others might pray. She caught movement near the truck, one of the men smoking, face half lit. The scar at his temple shimmered under the lighter's flame. Mikhail Varanov. Her breath hitched. Target visual confirmed, Varanov. Static crackled in her ear. Holt again. "Repeat." She swallowed hard. "It's him, he's alive." A pause. "We're adjusting plan, hold fire." But her finger had already found the trigger guard, not to shoot, but to steady. Her pulse beat in her throat. Every cell in her body screamed to end it now, to erase the face that haunted every night since Fallujah. She could almost feel Thompson's voice beside her, whispering through the wind, "Take the shot." She closed her eyes for 1 heartbeat, then she opened them again. "Copy," she said finally, holding. Below, the team advanced, silent and quick. She tracked them through her scope, every movement synchronized. They reached the compound's edge. Holt signaled. Barnes moved left, placing charges. Another operator covered the gate. Emma scanned the perimeter. 2 new heat signatures appeared near the east side, moving fast. "Holt, you've got movement east 50 meters. They know you're there." The radio crackled. "How?" Gunfire erupted. Muzzle flashes tore the dark apart. The quiet mission turned violent in seconds. Emma's scope followed instinctively, target, breath, trigger. She fired once. A man dropped. Another shot, another fall. Each pull of the trigger felt like a heartbeat returning to rhythm. But there were too many. The compound was alive now, crawling with movement. Radios blared in Arabic, headlights flicked on, shouts echoed through the valley. "Holt, exfil compromised," Barnes shouted. "They've got reinforcements coming in from the ridge." "Cross," Holt barked. "We need cover." She exhaled slowly. "Copy that." Then the storm began. Her rifle sang, controlled and cold, each shot precise, each breath measured. The world around her narrowed to the space between sight and silence. She picked targets by pattern, first the gunners, then the runners, then the radio men. In less than a minute she dropped 9. The rest scattered for cover. Through her scope she saw Barnes dragging one of the wounded operators to safety. Holt covered them, shouting for smoke. The valley filled with gunfire and dust. It was Fallujah again, only louder in her head. The ghosts had found her. The radio crackled again, Kaine's voice cutting through static. "Phantom, this is command. What's your status?" She hesitated only a moment before answering. "Engaged. Revenant confirmed. They were waiting for us." "Extraction inbound, 2 minutes." 2 minutes, she muttered. "Might as well be forever." The wind changed, pushing sand across her scope. She blinked against it, adjusting elevation. Varanov had vanished from view. Her gut tightened. Target lost. Repositioning. She slid down the ridge, low and fast, moving through thorn and dust. Her boots found silence, her breathing barely audible. She came to rest behind a wrecked vehicle, scanning. Then she saw him, Varanov, 50 meters out, standing beside a black van, radio to his ear. Calm, composed, the faintest smile on his lips, as if he knew she was watching. He turned his head slightly, eyes sweeping the darkness, then lifted his hand in a mock salute. She froze. A click behind her broke the spell. Emma spun, knife flashing, slamming the figure to the ground. But the man under her wasn't Revenant. It was Holt. Blood smeared his temple. "Friendly," he gasped. "It's me." She released him instantly, adrenaline still burning in her limbs. "Where's Barnes?" Holt coughed, wincing. "He's hit, shoulder, we're pulling back." She glanced toward the ridge. Varanov was gone. The van was gone. Only tire tracks and echoes remained. Kaine's voice roared through the comm. "Phantom, extraction now." She turned, hoisting Holt to his feet, dragging him toward the flare line. The Osprey's silhouette appeared against the horizon, rotors chewing the sand into storms. They ran, bullets snapping past. She fired behind them without thinking, covering their retreat. They leapt onto the ramp as the aircraft lifted, the wind clawing at them. Barnes was inside, pale but conscious, his arm wrapped tight. Holt slumped beside him, chest heaving. Emma stood at the edge of the open ramp, the desert below stretching like an ocean of ash. In the distance, small explosions marked the compound's destruction, but her eyes were fixed on the van's fatting trail. Varanov had looked straight into her scope and smiled. He wanted her to see him, to remember. Inside the cabin, Kaine's voice came through the headset again. "Mission incomplete, but intel secured. We'll regroup at base." Emma didn't respond. She was still staring out, the wind tearing through her hair. For the first time in years, she wasn't just fighting enemies. She was fighting the ghosts of what she'd failed to finish. Barnes spoke quietly behind her. "You saw him, didn't you?" She nodded. "He saw me first." The engines roared, drowning everything. But even through the noise, she could still hear the echo of his voice from long ago, back in the ruins of Fallujah. "You can't kill what's already dead." She laughed then, bitter and exhausted. She didn't laugh now. The horizon blurred beneath them, and the desert swallowed the evidence of another unfinished battle. Emma turned away from the open sky and sat down, hands trembling against the rifle in her lap. She whispered to herself, so softly the wind almost took it away. They wanted Phantom back, now they have her. And somewhere, far below in the dark, a man with a scar and a radio whispered into the static, his tone cold and reverent. "Welcome back, Phantom." Why did the silence after a mission always feel louder than the battle itself? The Osprey's engines faded into the wind as the aircraft touched down on the JSOC landing pad. The ramp lowered, spilling light into the cabin. The first thing Emma noticed was the smell, sterile disinfectant mixed with jet fuel. The kind of smell that clung to every debriefing, every aftermath. The kind that told soldiers they'd lived through another one, whether they should have or not. Barnes was the first to be taken off. His shoulder wound wasn't fatal, but it was deep, angry. He waved her off with a pained grin as the medics carried him past. Holt followed, head bandaged, jaw clenched tight. He didn't look at her. The others avoided her eyes entirely. It wasn't hostility. It was something else, something quieter, heavier, reverence laced with fear. Inside, under the harsh lights of the operations bay, Kaine stood waiting. His face was unreadable, but his tone carried weight. "Report," he said. Emma stood before him, the dust still clinging to her uniform, her hair tied back in a messy knot. Her voice was calm. "Compound neutralized. Intel drive recovered. Casualties, 2 wounded, no fatalities. Primary target escaped." Kaine's eyes sharpened. "Escaped." She nodded once. "Mikhail Varanov, alive, confirmed visual contact." He was silent for a long time, jaw tightening. Then he exhaled. That name again. He turned toward the command display, where satellite footage replayed in looping silence, blurry images of the compound, gunfire, fleeing figures. "You're sure it was him?" "I'm sure." He didn't ask how she could be. He'd seen her certainty before. The rest of the team filtered into the room, bruised, dirt-streaked, but alive. Holt stood at the back, arms crossed. His jaw was still bleeding through the fresh bandage. When Kaine turned to debrief, Holt's voice cut across the silence like a blade. "We were compromised, sir." Kaine turned, eyebrows lifting. "Compromised how?" "Revenant knew we were coming," Holt said flatly. "They had snipers pre-positioned, multiple escape routes, and active comms monitoring. Someone leaked our movement window." The air went cold. Kaine's gaze flicked from Holt to Emma. "You suggesting we've got a leak inside JSOC?" Holt didn't hesitate. "I'm suggesting someone warned them." His eyes slid toward Emma. The silence that followed was heavy, electric. Even the hum of the equipment seemed to hold its breath. Emma's expression didn't change. "You think it was me?" Holt didn't blink. "I think the timing's convenient. You show up after 4 years off the grid, and the enemy suddenly knows our playbook." Barnes stepped forward, voice steady despite the sling around his arm. "That's enough, Holt." But Holt didn't stop. "With all due respect, sir, we don't even know who she really is. Files say admin. General says legend. The enemy calls her by name. You tell me which story's true." Emma stared at him, calm, controlled. "All of them," she said, "depending on which day you ask." Kaine raised a hand. "Enough." His voice was steel. "We're not turning this into a witch hunt. We'll analyze comm logs and satellite relays. No one moves until we know how Revenant got our flight path." He looked at Emma, his tone softening just slightly. "You need rest." But Emma didn't move. Her eyes lingered on the tactical board, specifically the blinking red marker over northern Syria, the one labeled Signal Origin Unknown. "Sir," she said quietly, "if Varanov's alive, he's already moving again. Every hour we sit here, he's another day ahead." Kaine exhaled. "And if I send you after him now, it'll look like revenge." Emma met his eyes. "It is." He studied her for a moment, then said quietly, "That's what I'm afraid of." The debrief ended without resolution. The team filed out. Barnes lingered. Holt didn't. When the room emptied, Emma stood before the map again, tracing the red marker with her eyes. The Revenant network, the ghost of Fallujah, the man with the scar who saluted her through a rifle scope. It all tied back to the same thing: the ambush that had killed Thompson, the mission that had killed Phantom. Outside, night had fully swallowed the desert. The wind hissed softly against the hangar doors. Emma walked the perimeter, the cold cutting through her fatigues. For the first time since Saber, she let herself breathe. She sat on the edge of a low wall, staring up at the dark sky. It was filled with the same indifferent stars that had watched over Fallujah. Somewhere out there, the same constellations that had marked the coordinates of her failure burned quietly on, oblivious. Footsteps approached behind her. Barnes. He handed her a small metal flask. "Coffee," he said. "Not great, but better than the nightmares." She accepted it, took a sip, and grimaced. "You're right, it's awful." He smiled faintly. "Helps, though." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence soldiers share after surviving something they can't explain. Finally he asked, "You really saw him, Varanov?" "I saw him," she said. "He saw me first." Barnes nodded slowly. "You think he's the one who set up Wraith?" "I know he is. He had Thompson's serial number burned into his vest plate when I last saw him, like a trophy." Barnes' jaw tightened. "Then we finish it." Emma's voice was quiet. "You sound like Kaine." He shrugged. "Kaine wants results. I just want to stop looking over my shoulder." She handed back the flask. "You'll be looking for a while." He hesitated, then asked, "You believe Holt's right about a leak?" Her eyes shifted to the shadows near the hangar. "He's not wrong. Revenant shouldn't have known our flight path. Someone inside gave them our coordinates." Barnes frowned. "Inside JSOC." She shook her head. "Deeper, maybe even higher." A silence settled again, heavier this time. Then Barnes stood, adjusting the sling on his arm. "I'll pull what I can from comm intercepts. You rest." But Emma didn't move. Rest doesn't come easy anymore. He nodded knowingly and left her there with the wind and the ghosts. When she finally returned to quarters, it was near dawn. The walls were sterile, impersonal. Her duffel sat untouched by the cot. She placed her rifle on the table, checked it again even though she didn't need to. The motions were mechanical, grounding. Then a small sound, a faint digital chirp. She turned toward her locker. Inside, a small device, her encrypted field radio, was flashing. Only one person knew that frequency. She lifted it, pressed connect. Static. Then a voice, low, male, faintly accented, familiar. "Phantom," it said. Her blood turned to ice. "Varanov." His tone was calm, almost amused. "Still alive. Impressive. You never were one to stay buried." She said nothing. He continued, "I thought perhaps you learned peace, but you always did crave war. You and I, we are the same, shadows pretending to be human." Her jaw tightened. "You should have stayed dead." He chuckled. "You killed my commander once. I learned from his mistakes. You can't kill what you've already become." "Then what do you want?" "You already know," he said. "You were the test. Saber was the signal. Now the real game begins. Tell your general he's not hunting ghosts, he's feeding them." The line went dead. Emma stood in the half-light of the room, the static still ringing in her ears. She realized her hands were shaking, though not from fear, from recognition. He was right about one thing. They were mirrors, distorted by the same reflection. Soldiers who'd lost everything except the part of themselves that refused to die. She turned off the radio, packed it in a pouch, and stepped out into the hall. The first light of morning spilled through the glass. Kaine was already there, waiting, holding a file. "You didn't sleep," he said. "Neither did you." He studied her face. "You got something to tell me." She nodded slightly. Varanov made contact. His expression darkened. "When?" "2 hours ago, encrypted channel." "What did he say?" She met his gaze. "That we're not hunting him, he's hunting us." Kaine's jaw set. "Then we move first." She tilted her head. "You don't even know where." He handed her the file. "Maybe I do." Inside were new coordinates. Satellite photos of a remote canyon north of Aleppo, thermal traces, supply convoys, a logo scrawled on the side of a transport truck, the same black raven she'd seen burned into the dark that night. She looked up at him. "This isn't recon anymore." Kaine nodded. "No, this is retaliation." Emma's eyes lingered on the photos, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Retaliation never ends well." Kaine's expression softened, almost weary. "Maybe not, but sometimes it ends." She closed the folder, the paper crackling like dry leaves. For the first time, she didn't feel the weight of orders. She felt choice, and the quiet terror that came with it. "Give me 12 hours," she said. "I'll be ready." Kaine nodded and turned to leave. At the doorway he paused. "Cross when this starts, there's no going back." She looked past him, out toward the endless desert. There never was. When the door shut behind him, Emma sat alone, the hum of the bass filling the room again. She opened her duffel, laid her gear out one piece at a time. Knife, scope, suppressor, ammunition, each item placed with the reverence of ritual. Then she reached for the photo, the one of her and Thompson. The edges were worn, the colors faded. She stared at it until her vision blurred. "Just one more mission," she whispered. "Then maybe we both rest." Outside, the wind rose, whispering against the steel walls like a memory that refused to fade. And far away, across a desert of secrets, Mikhail Varanov stood over a table of maps, his voice calm as he traced a red line toward Aleppo. "She's coming," he said to the men gathered around him. "Good." He smiled faintly. "Let the ghost return home." Why did every mission feel less like a beginning, and more like the continuation of something she could never end? The air inside the hangar was thick with preparation, the metallic clang of magazines, the low murmur of operators syncing comms, the restless energy of people trying not to think too much about dying. Outside, the night hummed low and electric. Floodlights swept across armored trucks and weapons crates, slicing the darkness into geometry. Emma sat on a crate near the edge of the hangar, cleaning her rifle. Not because it needed it, but because her hands needed something to do. Across from her, Barnes adjusted his sling, watching her with quiet concern. "You've been staring at that scope for 20 minutes, he said. "Just thinking," she replied. "About him." She didn't answer, she didn't need to. Barnes sighed, leaning back against the wall. "You know, there's a difference between closure and obsession." "I know," she said softly. "One pretends to be the other until it is." Before he could respond, Kaine's voice cut through the air. "Briefing in 5." They gathered around the hollow display, the same small, scarred group that had survived the last op. Holt stood on the far side, arms folded. The tension between him and Emma hadn't faded. If anything, it had sharpened into something brittle and dangerous. Kaine tapped the console. A 3D map flickered to life, a canyon system carved deep into northern Syria, sparse terrain, high ridges, few exits. "Satellite confirms revenant activity here," he said. "Subterranean structure beneath the canyon floor, probably their comm relay and data vault. Our objective is simple: infiltrate, extract intel, eliminate Varanov if he's present." He turned toward Emma. "Cross, you'll provide overwatch from Point Bravo, high elevation. You'll have line of sight to the compound's entrance. Barnes will lead the assault element. Holt, your point security." Holt's jaw tightened. "Understood." Kaine looked at each of them in turn. "We don't know what's waiting down there. Revenants adapted. They're not insurgents anymore. They're organized, funded, and they know our tactics. So we change the rhythm. We don't hit them where they expect. We become the ghosts they think they are." The room was silent for a moment. Then Emma said quietly, "What happens if this is a trap?" Kaine's gaze didn't waver. "Then we spring it anyway, on our terms." The plan finalized, the team broke into movement, methodical, almost mechanical. The kind of motion soldiers use to hide fear. Emma checked her gear again, feeling the familiar weight of it settle across her shoulders. Every strap, every click, every sound brought back echoes of another life she thought she'd buried. An hour later, they were airborne. The Blackhawk sliced through the night, hugging low altitudes. The desert stretched below, endless and ancient. Inside the cabin, red lights bathed the faces of the team in ghostly hues. Nobody spoke. Holt sat across from her, silent but watchful. His hand never left his rifle. Barnes glanced between them, tension humming like static. Through the headset, Kaine's voice came steady. 30 seconds. Emma tightened her gloves. Copy. The helicopter banked hard. The door gunner motioned. The desert floor rose fast, a canyon mouth, black as a wound. The rope dropped. They descended one by one, swallowed by shadow. The air on the canyon floor was cold, damp. Emma climbed to her overwatch point, scaling a jagged ridge that overlooked the compound entrance. Below, faint lights glowed from beneath the rock, an artificial heartbeat in the dark. She set up her rifle, aligning her sightline. Through her scope, she saw the team move, Barnes leading, Holt covering, the others in silent formation. Their shapes melted into the rock. The comm crackled. Bravo, this is ground, in position. Copy, Emma replied. No movement topside, you're clear to proceed. Minutes passed in silence. The only sounds were the desert wind and the steady rhythm of her breathing. Then a faint vibration under her boots, low, mechanical, not footsteps, machinery. She keyed her mic, hearing power hum underground, possible automated systems. Barnes responded quietly, Roger that, entering access tunnel. Through the scope, she watched them disappear into the mouth of the canyon. Her gut tightened. Something felt wrong, the way the air seemed too still, too prepared. 10 minutes passed, then 5 more. Static filled the channel. Ground, this is Bravo, Sitrep. Nothing. She adjusted frequencies. Barnes, respond. Still nothing. The silence stretched until it began to feel sentient. Then faintly, a voice garbled through interference. Trapsy sealed contact. The channel died. Emma's pulse kicked. She shifted her scope toward the entrance just in time to see the flash, a bloom of light underground, followed by a muffled concussive thump. Dust geysered from the tunnel mouth. Command, this is Bravo, she barked. We've got explosions inside the target structure. Team is compromised. No response. She tried again, static. Her mind raced. The comms were jammed, localized interference. Revenant had expected them. Her hand hovered over the trigger, scanning for movement. Then she saw it, figures emerging from the canyon shadows. Not her team. Black uniforms, advanced rigs, night optics, moving with precision. Revenant. Damn it, she hissed. She fired once. The first man dropped. The second crouched behind cover, firing back in controlled bursts. She adjusted, exhaled, shot again. Another fell, but there were too many. Below, the tunnel mouth flickered again, and then she saw movement. Barnes stumbled into the open, dragging another operator. Smoke poured from the entrance. He keyed his mic, shouting something she could barely make out. Ambush, Holt, betray. The line cut. Emma froze, betray. Her scope swung. There on the ridge opposite hers, a flicker of light, not muzzle flash, optics glare. A sniper. Her instinct kicked in. She rolled, a round cracking against the rock where her head had been a second earlier. Dust exploded around her. She slid back into position, scanning the ridge. Then she saw him, Holt. Not Revenant, not friendly. Just Holt lying prone, rifle braced, aiming down toward the canyon floor at Barnes. For a heartbeat, her body refused to move. Betrayal didn't fit into training. It didn't compute. But there he was, calm, deliberate, aligning his shot. She squeezed her trigger first. The bullet took him high in the shoulder, spinning him back. His rifle clattered down the rocks. He tried to crawl, blood darkening the dust. She was on him before he could reach the weapon, boot pressing against his wrist. Why, she hissed. Holt's teeth clenched against the pain. You don't get it, do you? He spat blood. Revenant isn't the enemy, it's the upgrade. Her eyes narrowed. You sold out your team. He laughed bitter. There is no team anymore. Kaine sold us years ago. You think JSOC's clean. Revenant was born from the same command chain that created you. Her stomach twisted. You're lying. Am I? His grin widened despite the blood. You think they buried you for peace. They buried you because they couldn't control you. You were the prototype, Cross, the perfect ghost. Revenant just finished what they started. She hesitated. For the first time since Saber, her aim faltered. A crack split the air a shot from below. Holt jerked once, his head snapping back. He went still. Emma turned. Barnes stood near the tunnel mouth, his weapon lowered, smoke curling from the barrel. "You okay?" he called out. She stared down at Holt's body, then back at Barnes. "I don't know." He climbed the ridge, limping, coughing from the smoke. "We found data servers inside," he said. "Encrypted. Whatever this place was, it wasn't just a hideout." She nodded numbly. "Kaine needs to see this." Barnes glanced at Holt's corpse. "You think he was telling the truth?" She didn't answer right away. The wind whipped dust around them, the horizon beginning to pale with approaching dawn. "Truth doesn't matter," she said finally. "Only who believes it." They gathered what they could, drives, documents, hard copies. When the extraction bird arrived, Emma didn't look back at the canyon. She couldn't. Inside the helicopter, Barnes dozed against the wall, exhausted. She sat opposite him, staring at her gloved hands. They were steady again, too steady. Kaine's voice came through the headset mid-flight. "Cross, report." She stared out the window at the desert unrolling below. "Mission complete," she said. Then, after a pause, "But you were right. It wasn't revenge, it was resurrection." Kaine's tone hardened. "Meaning?" "They're not rebuilding, they're replacing. Revenant isn't hunting soldiers, they're recruiting them." The line went quiet for a beat. Then Kaine said, "Bring the data home, we'll deal with the rest later." But Emma knew later wasn't coming. When the bird touched down, dawn was spilling over the horizon. The base lights flickered in the new sunlight, pale and artificial. She stepped out onto the tarmac, her boots crunching against gravel. Holt's words still echoed inside her head like a curse. "You were the prototype." If that was true, then every ghost she'd fought since Fallujah wasn't just an enemy. They were reflections, echoes of what she might have been if she'd never stopped pulling the trigger. As she walked toward the debriefing building, Barnes called after her. "You think it's over?" She didn't turn. "No," she said quietly, "it's just starting to remember me." Far away, in a black bunker miles beneath the desert, a monitor flickered to life. On it, a file labeled Project, Phantom, Classified, opened. Two images appeared side by side, one of Emma Cross, the other Mikhail Varanov. And beneath them, a single line of text. Phase 2, Convergence initiated. Why did the truth always arrive too late to change anything? The data drives from the Revenant compound were spread across the operations table like pieces of a broken puzzle. Lines of code, intercepted comms, and encrypted files blinked on the monitors, their glow turning the debriefing room into a cold aquarium of light. Emma stood motionless beside them, arms crossed, the tension in her jaw betraying what her face didn't. Kaine paced on the far side of the table, his eyes fixed on the streaming data. Barnes sat nearby, shoulders still wrapped in gauze, exhaustion pulling at him like gravity. No one spoke. The hum of the hard drives filled the silence, a mechanical heartbeat counting down to something inevitable. Finally, Kaine exhaled. "We decrypted part of the data. Revenant wasn't just a rogue network." He turned the display. "They were funded." Emma's eyes flicked to the screen. Financial records scrolled by, untraceable accounts, government shell companies, and one name that made her blood go still. Defense Advanced Operations Command. Her voice came quiet, controlled. "That's us." Kaine nodded grimly. "A shadow branch, autonomous, formed after Desert Wraith, supposedly shut down 2 years ago." Barnes frowned. So Revenant was what, a side project? Kaine hesitated, then said, not exactly. Revenant was an evolution, a continuation of something older. He looked at Emma, something called Project Phantom. For a heartbeat the room seemed to shrink. Emma's breath caught. Say that again. Kaine tapped a command. A classified file appeared on the central monitor. Her name sat at the top in bold type. Below it, lines of text that didn't feel real. Subject cross Emma L. Status, prototype operative, neural pattern integration study. Objective, develop adaptable cognitive architecture for enhanced marksmanship and predictive engagement response. Designation, Phantom Unit 1. Emma stared, unable to move. Neural pattern integration. Kaine's tone was flat. It was experimental. They used brainwave mapping from elite operators to create adaptive combat algorithms. You weren't just trained, Cross. You were studied, modeled. Barnes blinked. Modeled as in? As in replicated, Kaine said. Your instincts, your reflex loops, your shot patterns, they turned them into data. Revenant's AI sniper systems were built off your neural imprint. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. You're saying they cloned my mind. Kaine didn't answer. He didn't need to. She took a slow step backward, her chest tightening. How long have you known? Kaine's silence was the only confession she needed. Her voice sharpened. How long? He looked at her. Since Sabre. The words hit harder than any bullet. You sent me there, she said quietly. You knew the attack wasn't random. You knew they wanted confirmation I was alive. Kaine's jaw tensed. We needed proof the Revenant protocol was active. You were the only variable that could trigger it. Barnes rose, disbelief written across his face. You used her as bait. Kaine's tone hardened. I used a soldier who could end a war before it started. Emma stepped forward, fury burning under her calm. You didn't end anything. You created it. He met her glare. Do you think wars stop because we wish them to? Someone was going to weaponize that tech. At least this way we had control. Her voice trembled, not with fear but with something colder. You turned me into a blueprint. Kaine didn't flinch. You turned yourself into one the day you made that shot in Fallujah. The silence that followed was unbearable. The monitors hummed. The lights flickered. For a moment, Emma thought she might break, but something in her held steady, the same steel that had carried her through fire and loss. She turned toward the display again. On it, two side-by-side neural maps pulsed, one labeled Phantom 1, the other Revenant Core Sigma. The signatures were almost identical. Barnes stared. That second one, that's Varanov, isn't it? Kaine nodded. They used his neural data, too. He was their counterweight, two ghosts, same architecture, different purpose, predator and prey. Emma's voice was low. A mirror war. Kaine nodded. Exactly. Revenant was built to predict and counter the next Phantom before it existed. Barnes muttered. So this whole thing, every attack, every ambush, it's just an algorithm trying to complete itself. Emma turned toward Kaine. And me. He hesitated. You're the original code. Her breath caught again. You mean I'm the weapon they're still trying to perfect? He didn't deny it. For a moment, all she could hear was the rush of her own pulse. It felt like being inside an echo chamber of betrayal. Every choice, every kill, every quiet act of survival, all of it cataloged, archived, turned into data points for someone else's war. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady again. What happens if I walk away? Kaine looked at her, eyes tired. You don't. They'll come for you until one of you isn't left. She nodded slowly. Then I guess I don't walk. Barnes rubbed a hand across his face. So what now? We sit here and wait for their next move. Kaine shook his head. We make ours first. He pulled up another file. The data indicates Revenant's command core is mobile. Varanov's leading it toward the Turkish border. We track him, we end this. Emma's gaze lingered on the red pulse moving across the map. You think killing him ends it? Kaine looked at her. You tell me you're the one he was built to finish. She stared at the map until the lines blurred. For the first time, the mission didn't feel like duty or revenge. It felt like fate written in code, inevitable, cruel, and unfinished. Hours later, the base settled into restless quiet. Kaine was gone, locked in another strategy room. Barnes had fallen asleep in his chair. The monitors still glowed, their data crawling endlessly. Emma sat alone at the table, staring at her file. She opened the report again. Page after page of her life dissected: reaction time metrics, stress thresholds, kill ratios, sleep deprivation, endurance. Every human flaw rendered in perfect numbers. At the end of the document, a line of text in small type. Operator emotional suppression. 97% stability threshold achieved. Subject exhibits residual empathy, anomaly persistent. Emma let out a broken laugh. Anomaly. Her reflection in the screen looked back at her, calm, unreadable, tired. She whispered to it, maybe that's what makes me human. A faint beep interrupted the thought. One of the encrypted files on the second monitor had finished decrypting. A new folder appeared, labeled Phantom Recall. She hesitated, then opened it. A video feed blinked to life, grainy security footage from years ago, the Fallujah ruins. She saw herself crouched behind a wall, Thompson beside her, both exhausted, bleeding. Then a blast. The screen shook. Thompson fell. She screamed something inaudible. The image froze. Text overlay appeared at the bottom. Neural capture sequence complete. Subject terminated. Status false. Flag initiated. Emma's hand went numb on the keyboard. They hadn't just studied her. They staged her death to cover the extraction of her mind. Kaine hadn't resurrected her. He'd reactivated her. Her throat tightened. She slammed the console off, the room plunging into darkness. For a few seconds she just stood there, breathing hard, trying not to shatter. Then the door opened. Barnes stood there, groggy, rubbing his eyes. You okay? She turned toward him, face unreadable. Yeah, just saw a ghost. He frowned. Which one? She managed a faint, bitter smile. Mine. He didn't press. He knew better. The next morning came gray and windless. Kaine's orders were already posted. The team would deploy within 24 hours. Final phase. No returns. Barnes caught up with her outside the hangar. You're really going through with this? She nodded. If they built something in my image, I have to end it myself. He studied her face. You think killing him will fix what they did to you? She shook her head. I think it'll remind them I'm still not theirs. Before he could respond, Kaine approached, his posture stiff. We leave at 400, gear up. Emma's eyes met his. You're not coming. His brows rose. Excuse me. This isn't your mission anymore. You don't want justice, Kaine, you want control. He took a step closer. You think you can do this without me? She tilted her head slightly. You've done enough. For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then Kaine said, if you go rogue, I'll have to treat you as an enemy. She gave a faint, tired smile. You already did. She turned and walked away, the rising wind catching her hair. Kaine didn't call after her. Maybe he understood, maybe he didn't. Barnes fell into step beside her as she reached the flight deck. You know, I could report you for this, he said quietly. Then why don't you? He shrugged. Because I owe you my life, and because part of me wants to see how this ends. She looked at him, the faintest trace of warmth in her eyes. You might not like it. He smiled grimly. I already don't. They climbed aboard the waiting transport, the engines rumbling to life. The sky above was bruised purple and gray, the kind of dawn that looked like the aftermath of something violent. As the aircraft lifted, Emma looked out at the receding base. For the first time in years, she wasn't following orders. She was following purpose, raw, dangerous, and uncertain. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Varanov waited. The man built from the same data as her, the same instincts, the same scars. A reflection shaped into her opposite. She whispered under her breath, barely audible over the roar of the engines. One ghost to end another. Barnes glanced over. What was that? She didn't answer. The desert stretched ahead, endless and waiting. And in the silence that followed, Emma Cross, once a soldier, once a phantom, began to feel something she hadn't in years. Not peace, not vengeance. Clarity. Why did the end always feel quieter than she imagined it would? The world outside the transport blurred into an ocean of red dust and rising dawn. The engines droned steady, constant, a heartbeat of machinery carrying them toward a place that felt less like a destination and more like destiny. Emma sat near the rear hatch, helmet off, eyes fixed on the horizon. Barnes sat across from her, silent, the weight of everything between them filling the narrow space. Neither had slept. Neither needed to. Some things were too heavy for dreams. When the call came through the headset, it was Kaine's voice, cold, clipped, official. Phantom Team, this is command. You are entering restricted airspace. Last chance to abort. Emma pressed the mic switch without hesitation. Negative command. Phantom Team is not aborting. Static crackled. Then Kaine again, quieter this time. Emma, don't make me call you hostile. Her gaze stayed forward. Then don't. She cut the channel. Barnes gave a low whistle. You just hung up on a 2-star general. She almost smiled. Feels good, doesn't it? He nodded, eyes on the window. I'll miss having clearance after this. Yeah, she said softly. Me too. The landscape below shifted from flat desert to ridged rock. The ruins of an old facility appeared, half buried, half alive with movement. Trucks, watchtowers, hidden infrastructure beneath the sand. Revenant's last stronghold. As the aircraft banked lower, she saw the emblem painted on one of the remaining walls, the black raven, wings outstretched. Beneath it, stenciled words barely visible through dust. Project Phantom, Archive Site 1. Her pulse slowed. They didn't hide it, Barnes muttered. They never do, she said. You hide sins you regret. This one they celebrated. The pilot's voice cut through. We're dropping at 500 meters out. You're on your own after that. They nodded, checked weapons, adjusted comms. When the ramp lowered, the dawn light hit them full in the face, pale and merciless. They moved fast, keeping low, crossing open sand until the first ridge gave them cover. Emma scanned through her scope. Guards patrolled the outer line, but the formation was tight, predictable, machine precision. These aren't people, she murmured. They're mapped. Mapped, Barnes asked. Behavioral replication, neural command loops. Barnes swore under his breath. You're telling me they're using your AI to control human operators? She nodded faintly. Not just mine. What do you mean? She zoomed the scope toward the far side of the compound, a figure standing by the central bunker entrance. Tall, deliberate, a faint scar catching the light. Mikhail Varanov, she said quietly, and he's not human anymore. Barnes frowned. What? Look at the way he moves. Fractional delay between motion and reaction. That's neural sync drift. He's wired, hybrid. Barnes stared through his own scope, so they merged him with the AI system. Emma's voice was barely a whisper. He is the system. They didn't have time to process. Patrols shifted, drones lifted from rooftops. The window was closing. Let's finish it, she said. They split, Barnes circling east to set the charges, Emma moving along the ridge toward the bunker. The air shimmered with heat and static interference. Her radio crackled with half-decoded signals, fragments of her own voice looped back through Revenant's comms. It was like hearing ghosts speak through broken glass. When she reached the final outcrop, she stopped, heart hammering. The entrance was unguarded now, deliberate, an invitation. She descended slowly, rifle ready. Inside, the corridor was lit by the cold glow of recessed LEDs. The walls were lined with cables and terminals. The air smelled faintly of ozone and decay. Every step echoed with memory. Halfway down, a door slid open on its own. "Welcome back, Phantom." His voice, smooth, calm, exactly as she remembered it, only metallic now, distorted by something synthetic. She stepped into the room. Varanov stood beside a console, the light reflecting off the metal ports at the base of his skull. His eyes glowed faintly blue under the pupils, human, but not entirely. "You shouldn't have come alone," he said. "I didn't," she replied. "You just haven't met the others yet." He smiled faintly. "You always did need backup." She raised her weapon. "You always did need a reason." He tilted his head. "I have one. We're not enemies, Emma. We're successors. You and I, the final products of a dream they couldn't control." "Dream," she spat. "It's a nightmare that killed hundreds." "It's evolution," he said simply. "You were designed to protect your side. I was designed to destroy it. But we were both built on the same foundation, fear." She tightened her grip. "Then let's end the experiment." Varanov took a step closer, hands empty, unarmed but dangerous all the same. "End it. You can't end what you are. You think killing me will change the data. They already have us stored in millions of lines of code. We're algorithms with bodies. They'll resurrect us again and again until we stop pretending to be human." "Maybe," she said, "but this time they lose both copies." She fired. The round hit centermass sparks instead of blood. He staggered, laughing even as he fell. See, predictable as ever. The lights around them flared red. Warning alarms echoed through the base. Auto-defense turrets unfolded from the ceiling, locking onto movement. She dove behind a console as gunfire shredded the wall. The air filled with smoke and debris. Barnes' voice crackled over comms. "Charges set. You need to get out now." "Not yet," she shouted, rolling across the floor, taking aim again. She fired at the power conduits above. Sparks exploded. The lights flickered. The turrets powered down one by one. When the smoke cleared, Varanov was gone. She scanned the room, nothing but shadow and the smell of burning circuitry. Then she heard it, his voice through the intercom. "You can't kill what's copied, Phantom. I am everywhere now. Every server, every satellite. You destroy this body and I wake in another." Her chest heaved. "Then I destroy the source." She sprinted deeper into the bunker. The corridors sloped downward, the sound of machinery growing louder. The core chamber opened before her, a cathedral of steel and light. At its center stood a column of glass filled with blue energy, data streams flickering like veins of lightning. "Project Phantom mainframe." Barnes' voice came again, frantic. "Emma, we've got reinforcements inbound. You have 60 seconds. "Copy," she said, stepping toward the column. Through the glass, faint silhouettes moved within the data flow, fragments of memory, images, faces. Thompson's voice. Kaine. Even her own. Echoes recorded, stored, fed into the system like fuel. "You see," Varanov's voice whispered from everywhere and nowhere, "we're immortal." Emma stared into the light. "No," she said softly, "you're imprisoned." She reached down, pulled the detonator from her vest, and clipped it to the control console. Varanov materialized at the edge of the light, half-formed, flickering between flesh and projection. "You'll kill yourself doing this." She looked at him, calm and resolute. "Then I'll finally die for the right reason." He lunged. She fired. The bullet passed through his shimmering form, a digital ghost screaming into static. She pressed the trigger. The explosion tore through the bunker with the force of a collapsing sun. Outside, the desert erupted, a shockwave rising like dawn itself. Barnes was thrown to the ground, sand raining down as the mountain swallowed itself in flame. The sky turned white, then orange, then silent. For a long time, nothing moved. Then the comm in Barnes' ear crackled faintly, a single voice faint but steady. "Tell Kaine it's done." Static swallowed the rest. He stared toward the burning horizon, the wind carrying the heat to his face. "God damn it, Cross." Hours later, the smoke began to settle. JSOC drones circled the ruins, their feeds transmitting back to command. Kaine watched from his office, face pale, eyes hollow. On one screen, telemetry faded Emma Cross. Signal lost. Barnes returned days later, his report brief and wordless. Kaine said nothing. There was nothing to say. But a week after the explosion, a transmission hit the JSOC mainframe. Untraceable origin. One line of encrypted text. "Don't look for me. Some ghosts finally earned their rest." No signature, no coordinates, just the words. Kaine closed the file and sat back, the hum of the command center filling the silence. He didn't know whether to feel relief or grief. Maybe both. Barnes stood beside him, arms crossed. "You think she made it?" Kaine looked at the horizon beyond the glass. "If she didn't, she chose how it ended. That's more than most of us get." He paused, then added quietly, "Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts." Outside, the wind swept across the endless desert. The crater still smoldered, glowing faintly under the fading sun. And somewhere beyond it, in the vast quiet between life and legend, a single figure walked away from the fire, her rifle slung low, her shadow long against the light. No radio, no orders, no name. Only silence. And that silence at last was hers.